Wish I knew something.
It has been a very eventful weekend in Formula One, so much so that we just skipped the weekend because it was just so chaotic that news was happening as we went that we had to kind of let's take a break. Let's let everything calm down so we could go over everything. I'm Joey. With me is Rob. Rob, how you doing today?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
Man, it's
Fucking ready to talk about this shit.
I've been itching to talk about it. I'm waiting for the official news release on all kinds of different things, but before we get to all the news that took place post race, let's talk about the weekend as a whole. First off, what is one thing this weekend that I would say shocked you the most in regards to on track activity? We'll talk about all off track stuff later.
On
I know
track.
the big news you want to talk about.
Of course, I want to talk about it because it's fucking hilarious. I guess on track, I feel the Racing Bulls were looking really good for the most part. I know towards the race, it kind of slacked off a little bit, but in the short term, I mean, they're able to show that there is potential in that car. So that's pretty interesting to see. I mean, if you look at what was it, quali, Hajar was second and Sonoda was third in the first round. They were fourth and fifth in the second round. So, and then finished in the top 10. But what's really interesting to me is that Hajar in all three times outpositioned Sonoda, the senior driver of that team.
In my opinion, with Racing Bulls, I think that car is being wasted. You know, like you said, they're doing well enough in qualifying, but the finishing results are not showing up in the race.
No, they're not.
You know, Sonoda in Australia, he was running in the top 6 pretty much the entire race, finishes 12th. In China, they were both in the top 10 and they finished 16th and 11th respectively. So I don't know if it's a strategy thing, I don't know if it's a setup thing, but you know, there's something that team needs to do to kind of get that car in the right direction, to get the points, to get to the best of the rest race for the championship. Um, but I do like what I see out of them. You know, they're a lot closer to Red Bull than I think everyone thought they would be,
No,
especially with
100%.
the rookie driver. Very interesting to see, you know, the Hondas last year with Red Bull. They'll go to Ford powertrains next year, both Racing Bulls and Red Bull. They go to Aston Martin next year, so it'll be fun to see the rest of the season, because when it was originally rumored that Honda was leaving Formula One in 20, I think it might have been 2021 or 2020. You know, that's when they really turned it on. You know, that's when they fought Mercedes for that constructors title. Didn't get it, but they did get the drivers championship with Max. So, you know, something that down the road could show improvement as upgrades begin to happen. Let's see if they even do very many upgrades. There will be some, but they'll probably be focused on the 26 car with the new regulations. My biggest surprise, honestly, is Red Bull. I don't know what is going on with this car.
That thing is just a big old paperweight, it seems like. There's nothing in it. Max is just doing as well as he is because he's Max. And I think that's being echoed throughout the paddock. I think Albon even said something about that.
Well, the biggest thing with Red Bull to me on track is that, you know, Adrian Newey being gone is a very huge hole in that team. He's been designing their car since Sebastian Vettel was winning their 4 championships back to back to back to back. So you don't have that, you know, basically that head coach that sits there and designs the schemes of the car and everything. He's gone. So now you've got somebody new who, did he learn under Adrian Newey? Did he learn anything from him? Is he a new person? I don't know the answer to that question, but at the same time, the results are showing that this is a problem. But I will say that I feel like the Red Bull car has always been on edge to the point where you have to drive it in the best conditions at like the best pace to get the most out of it. If you're any kind of way, skittish with that car, you might as well, park it because you're not gonna last.
Well, is it built that way because, or it feels that way because that's the way that Max drives? Because he always has driven on the edge, or is it because the car is just so difficult to manage because of the way that it's designed that even Max is struggling?
Honestly, I think it's. I honestly don't know.
Yeah,
You would think that because Max is the number one driver, that he, they would design the car more around his style. But if he's sitting there complaining about the car, and you hear his engineer Jean Pierre Lambiase say, "We know Max, just put your head down. Let's do it. Let's do what we do." You can only do that for so long before it just becomes unbearable to drive, and we have to fix something. When their upgrades come up, they haven't announced any upgrades yet. We'll see. We'll see what'll happen. Uh,
I
if
think
the
we'll see
if
something in the first European races.
well, I'm trying to pull up the schedule because for some reason my computer's acting up. But in my honest opinion, I don't know that it's going to be that far down the road. It may be a little further, but it also depends. When does like how into this year's car are you going to upgrade? Are you just going to say, "Hey, this is what it is," because you're well into
Yeah,
May by the time you hit the European season.
yeah. I forgot about Bahrain and Saudi
You still
Arabia,
got
and
you
then
still got
Miami.
you got those two, and then you have, like you said, Miami. Miami is where McLaren turned it on.
Hmm.
In my opinion, you need to have upgrades by then and have good data and everything to get that car turned around, or you're going to be, you're not going to be looking at, oh, we can win the constructors title. Yes, they're third, but Ferrari, you take away them losing points for the double DQ,
Hmm. Ferrari would have been
they're in
in.
fourth.
Yeah,
They're in fourth place. So it's a struggle bus for Red Bull right now, and it's something that whenever there's a new technical regulation coming out, like the last of the V8s, the last 4 years of V8s, they were golden. They had it figured out. The turbo hybrids came up, they struggled right out the gate. It wasn't the same Red Bull that it was in 2013. Then you get 2021. Okay, we figured it out. We've got this going. We win the drivers' championship. New regulations, completely different car. They've got it. The RB19, the most successful car in Formula One history, is built within this era. Now you go into 2026. Maybe they're looking at this year, we're not going to do so much to the car just because there is new technical regulations next year.
right.
There's talks of them going to V10s
I
in
love the sound of that too. I know
2 or
you
3
do.
years. Oh, let me tell you. In 2001, watching Speed Vision, hearing those cars winding down the straights, there's a video of Lewis Hamilton doing an interview in Abu Dhabi, and I think it was Fernando Alonso is driving a V10 powered, I think the Renault, around the track, and you just see, it was when they were wearing masks, so you just see Lewis's eyes. He's mid sentence, and he just goes, and he turns around, and you see him kind of like wait for a second. You could just see that moment of, oh my god, that sounds so nice.
Right.
Um, I mean, there's so much change coming to Formula One with these regulations that you almost you don't want to go full lame duck because that is a lot of money coming your way, but you do get a little more wind tunnel time the further down the grid you are. So is that something that you sit there and look at, hey, we're going to lose out on some money, but we're going to have a little bit more time in the wind tunnel? I wouldn't. I'd be panic. Like, it's full blown panic mode at Red Bull right now.
I honestly wouldn't be worried about the wind tunnel as much because I feel like with the new engine, you need to run the car to really figure out what's going, like how to build around it. The aerodynamics are not going to change. Like, yeah, you could adjust certain things to make it better for you, but you only need a certain amount of time to figure that out in the wind tunnel. Whereas you need to be on the track running that engine and figuring out where does it work, how does it do in the hairpins, the chicanes, those kind of areas. That's where I feel you're going to get the most knowledge out of that new engine.
But the problem is, if you don't have the grip, if you don't have the downforce, if you don't have all of that figured out, your corner speeds then suffer.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, your straight line speeds suffer. Look at, I think it might have been Lando's lap coming out of, it was like right before the long straightaway. I think that's 13.
I think so. Yeah.
Coming out of 13, he wiggled and it hurt his straight line speed. He was good until he got to that straightaway. Because when you come off a corner like that, if you wiggle, if you and I are racing, we're coming out of that straight, you're behind me. If you wiggle a little bit, I have more speed at the middle of the back straight than you do if you're outside of my draft. If you don't have any kind of, toe, I'm gone. That's my moment where I'm like, see ya, I'm out of here. So you have to have that perfect balance. It has to be able to handle. You can't be on a knife edge and coming out of the corner. Like you're coming out of a right-hander. You can't be doing this because you're scrubbing your speed.
Mm-hmm.
You want to come out of that corner just like this and get going. So that's Red Bull struggles to me. Granted, we kind of started to see some gremlins last season towards the end, and especially all year with Checo.
Yeah.
He was struggling. Like that was just a struggle with that car. He couldn't get it underneath him. I mean, how many races did he DNF in that Max finished?
What, like 4?
And
Maybe more?
and they said, Drive to Survive, they said you need both drivers to score points to win the constructors.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're forgetting in 2023, if you took Checo's points out of the constructors championship, Red Bull still win the constructors championship by himself.
But that's also when Max is killing it in the RB19 and no one can keep up.
Red Bull that year lost one race. Only one.
Was it Carlos Sainz?
Carlos won at, was it Britain or was it
trivia
Singapore?
Question for people. Put your comments.
Yes. What race was it that he won that year?
Do you feel that that's where Orlando is having struggles, especially in China? Because he was struggling quite a bit in quality and all that.
Lando, or we're switching back to McLaren?
Or, yeah.
Okay.
Or not quality, it was a sprint.
I think his problem was he ended up in a bad spot. He was on the outside, entering turn 1.
Mm-hmm.
Going into 2, you're still there. You're just trying to maintain your position. Gets the run in 3, has the inside line. And then when he goes into 5, which is that hairpin heading into 7.
That hairpin down the hill, right?
He hit the brakes, was on the grass. It lost it. He ended up 3 wide in the hairpin, and it's just bad positioning. And he was, again, if you're sideways, you're not going faster in Formula One. So he got passed by 2 cars, and then he just struggled to pass Stroll. Being in traffic, yes, you have DRS, but you get that dirty air. The car doesn't like dirty air. You're understeering like crazy. You don't have as much grip. The front wing's not being pushed down to the ground. So at the end of the day, you need that clean air. You need that open space to get there. And he was able to pass Stroll at the very end to snag the last points position in the sprint.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing is, he struggles. Like the new surface is what caused him to struggle. And it's his, honestly, it's his driving style. Him and Oscar have two different driving styles. If you watch Oscar, he goes in, heavy brakes it, and then almost like V's the corner where he goes, and then once he gets it slowed down enough,
Something about that hairpin.
that's where you see, that's where you see him kind of turn. So you're not putting a
Lando just
whole lot.
hits the curb the whole time.
You're not putting a lot of stress on the front tires by doing that because you're getting the car slowed down and then you're turning. Whereas with Lando, he arcs the corner in more of a U, and he uses a lot of braking while turning, which puts a lot of stress on the front tires, which puts a lot of heat in the brakes and causes, the struggle with the front tires, which is why I think he had the problems that he had in sprint quali or in the sprint race with passing Lance Stroll and having that trouble with, up to the point where he had his brake problem at the end of the race. Now,
but we learned that was more the pedal itself than not having actually.
I haven't seen what it was. It might have been a hydraulic issue with his brakes, anything like that. But honestly, I think this is an isolated issue with that because
100%.
when you have newer surfaces, that's where you're going to tend to have, you have a little bit more grip in the higher speed corners because it doesn't have that much age. The more age you have, the slicker the track gets. So, like I said, brand new track, a lot of grip. You're putting in a little more speed in the corners, so it's a lot of wear on the tires. A lot of times what you'll hear racing series do, if they go to a track that has a brand new surface, they'll bring a harder tire so that you don't have blowouts. You're not endangering the drivers. With this, I think Formula One and Pirelli kind of put a little more, emphasis on, hey, let's let these tires wear out and let's make them struggle a little bit so that they have to game plan. So that way you're not having, hey, we're going to put you on softs and you're going to run 50%, more than 50% of the race on softs. And then we're going to put you on mediums just because we have to. And it'd be no difference. So they're going to bring out softer tires for that.
Right.
So that was, I think, the biggest struggle for Lando. In Japan, he's not going to have that same issue. He's going to be back to, the Lando of Australia. That's my opinion on that. What it does show is it's going to be a really tight battle for the championship as we go into the season. I think that. Sorry. Australia's result for Oscar doesn't show how talented he is, but him having a good result, him winning the race and getting himself back into it, being 10 points behind Lando, just watch. You're going to have, it just takes 2 races and Oscar's back in it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Another thing I want to talk about is you said offline that the Merc car is boring to you, and I want you to elaborate on what you mean by boring, because I feel Antonelli is, and dare I say Russell, we all know how much I don't like Russell, but he is a good driver. He is doing well. But Antonelli is also doing great for a rookie driver, barely 18 years old, and he's in the points in his first 2 races in a Mercedes. I think, help me understand your boring car comment.
So it's easier to drive. George Russell has come out and said that it's easier to drive than the previous cars. Now,
did he mean that there's less porpoising? Did he elaborate?
It's probably less porpoising. It might be, they want the car to go here. It's going to go where they want it. It's got a little bit more speed. I mean, let's be honest. If you look at the last 3 years, since this car has been, since this generation of car, they are 12 points ahead of where they were in 2022 and 2023, and they're 24 points ahead of where they were last year.
Mm-hmm.
So that tells you that they've got a handle on this car. Now, have they figured it completely out? Not really.
No.
But the fact that you're getting the podiums, George has podiumed in both races, and Antonelli's not that far behind. It's going to be a matter of time before they're competing for wins. It's now they're at the point where, okay, we're back at it. They're second in the Constructors' Championship behind McLaren.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be the ones that are going to be, the front runners to push McLaren further. Again, if you take the double D and the DSQ by Ferrari out of it, maybe that changes things. But as of right now, you're 78 points to McLaren and 57 points to Mercedes. It takes one McLaren bad weekend for Mercedes to be front runners.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, I was thinking about it while you were talking. The Merc last year was built around Lewis Hamilton, who was the number one driver. This one's built around Russell more, which I think Antonelli is able to adapt to because I think he's got a more aggressive driving style, so he can handle this car pretty easily. He's just still trying to figure out how to drive like Russell a little bit, where the car works for him. The reason it's boring is because Russell's boring. He's a boring driver. He's a boring human being. I had to. I had to take a dig at him. But at the same time, he's boring, but he's good. And that's where this car is right now. The upgrades that they're going to come in, will they help Antonelli? Will they help Russell? It remains to be seen, I feel.
It honestly, they just need to keep the car the way it is. It's a very useful weapon. It's a very good machine. Again, there's upgrades that could happen to McLaren that could completely derail their entire
100%.
season.
Their last, what was it, 2 years ago? That's exactly what happened to them, if I'm not mistaken, on some upgrades. Like the car just went
2 years
total
ago.
call it a shit box.
2 years ago, for McLaren, everything was kind of like they were up there.
Mm-hmm.
They started last season, the car was shit. And then they hit Miami, had those upgrades, and it was like, okay, we have a new fastest car in town.
Yeah. But no, I'm talking about Mercedes.
Mercedes, the car has been bad since 2022.
Yeah. How fucked would it be if they win the Constructors or Russell wins the championship the year Hamilton leaves?
Which, so if I can believe, if what was really said in Drive to Survive was really said, Lewis thought they're heading in the wrong direction. But let's be real. Like I said, Mercedes is 57 points. Ferrari's at 17, tied with Williams for fourth.
Mm-hmm.
Lewis Hamilton has 9. Charles Leclerc has 8. They're both behind Lance Stroll, Esteban Ocon, Alex Albon.
That's fucking scary to hear.
But you got to remember they lost points from being disqualified. So
right, because they were originally 4th and 5th.
The way I see it, you get at most 2 kind of mulligans where you don't score points and you could still get away with fighting for a championship. But you need the results to back it up. They've used one. They don't. You better hope that doesn't happen again, or you don't have a bad result again, like you did in Australia because of pit strategy.
Well, we know in Suzuka they're going to have to run higher so that they don't have that issue. What I find funny is that Leclerc was 1 kilogram too light at the end, and that's how he got DQ'd. That was after they were able, because they put a new wing on, like because you got to have a full car weight to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Did he just have too low of fuel at the end? Like,
so
what's your thought?
Somebody said that the reason that they were disqualified on Leclerc's side was because of tire wear. I don't believe that. I
mean, you could get a kilogram out of that, but that seems like a stretch.
I mean, they said that that was one reason why. But where a kilogram is not exactly just like a piece of paper.
No.
And the thing that tells me that they're just like, hey, yeah, we're underweight. They didn't fight it. They didn't appeal it.
They probably knew.
They were just like, oh well, like it is what it is.
I mean, for a kilogram, I feel like it's a combination. The tire wear, maybe gas. He probably had some shredding on his underside, just like Lewis had. Lewis was clearly worse. I mean, he lost the wing, so he had a natural um, drag or whatever. You know the words that I'm looking for.
Yeah, I mean, but
You're smarter than me about the mechanics of it. But
it honestly, like, I think the thing that's more kind of painful is Lewis's disqualification.
yeah, half a millimeter.
This is how wide, or this is how thick he was off by a card. That's it. If he was this much, like, if his skid plate was this much thicker,
yeah,
he'd have finished where he finished. That would hurt me more than being underweight, because it could be that there may be another piece or part that came off the car when they touched.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just something they missed, and they were just like, oh, okay, I guess we're underweight. Or they just, like, they didn't add something, or they just said, hey, this piece was just light. Maybe this piece of carbon fiber didn't go through correctly, and that's why they were light. Or it could be anything. But if I'm Ferrari, I just reset. I'd say we've had pretty bad 2 weeks. We had a bad strategy call week 1. Week 2, we just got disqualified. Granted, you did come out of the sprint race with a win. So
yeah.
you didn't completely lose points on the weekend. But you have to get the results. You have to, hey, in Japan, it's a fresh start. We start anew. We can't dwell on the past. And that's something that Ferrari
the
kind of
sprint
struggles
weekend cause may have been a contributing factor?
No, because the teams plan for that, and this isn't the first sprint race. If this was the first ever sprint race, I could see it. But
it's the first one on a new turf in China.
But I think the only thing that affects is the plank, because the speeds are a little higher. And I mean, you saw them going into 6 and 7, wheeling that car back and forth. They were going very quickly. It just, you have to account for it. Like, if somehow there was a bump in Zandvoort that every team knew about, and your car was below, and it's because of that bump, well, then you should have avoided the bump.
Right.
Or, hey, slow down so you don't hit it as aggressive. It's on the teams and drivers to make sure that their car is fully legal no matter what. It does, like, you could be out there and the whole track is full of sand. You still got to make sure that your car is legal at the end of the day.
And not drive through it like an idiot like Lance Stroll did last year.
Well, I mean, he is the better Aston Martin driver right now.
That's only because Alonso had an engine issue?
Well, he crashed last week. He crashed in Australia, and then this past race, he had a brake failure.
Mm-hmm.
I would almost
That's
think
what it was. He had no brakes at the beginning of the race.
It was kind of like Max in Australia last year, where he had fire in the brakes, and it just wasn't. He couldn't get it cool enough.
Yep.
So I think this is a good point. Oh, I do want to bring up one more thing. So the technical regulations kind of stiffened the problem with that little mini DRS effect, where cars are going down the straight and you just see the rear wing just kind of pick up a little bit.
Right.
I saw an interview, or I saw a video where they were talking about, like, what teams are going to be affected most by this. And I think Alpine has come out and said, like, they're the ones who had to make the most design changes to fix it and to, make up for that. That's going to get kind of tight when we get to the end of the year with the cost cap. If, down the road, hey, we have a little bit of money left over, or hey, we're kind of tight on the budget. Like, I think I saw that speaking of the cost cap, I want to say I saw Carlos is using a chassis from last year
to save money.
Yes, I think
It's
that,
not
and
the
they
one
just
that
put
got repaired, was it? Or rebuilt completely? Did Sargent
at
sold
least
them?
that's what he was using. At least that's what he was using at Australia. But at least for these two or three races, then once they get to the European races or maybe Japan, he'll be in a normal car. But
I'm kind of glad you brought him up because I want to talk about how piss poor he's looking right now. Like he's not in the very back, but he's not doing great either. So I mean, where did he end up in? He was out in SQ2. Where was he in quali? He was out in round 2 in quali too. Like he is the mid, like the back middle in that Williams, whereas Albon is, in the top 10.
But you have to remember, with this car, Albon's kind of used to what Williams is like, the procedures, the looking at the data and figuring out like, okay, this is where, I know where I got to improve. Carlos said, or remember, Lewis said going from Mercedes to Ferrari,
they do everything backwards.
Their data is upside down to him.
Mm-hmm.
Carlos said, yes, I see the same thing that Lewis says because for the last couple of years, I've seen it this way. Now I see it this way. So it's a little bit of that. It's a lot of sandbagging happens in testing. Now, I'm not saying that Carlos is going to have this trouble all year. I think when you get to, round 4, round 5, maybe then he'll start turning it around and get going in the right direction. And they even said that, Alex Albon said that he thought that the team would struggle in China because of the long sweeping turns and all of that. With Japan, you have those sweeping turns again. You have the S's, you have spoon curve, you have, I think it's 130R. You have those corners where it's a sweeper or it's a full throttle turn. But at the same time, you have the hairpins, you have the Casio chicane, unless they changed the name of it recently.
You know the names. I don't know the names.
I've watched Formula One for a while, and I've raced on that track on Gran Turismo like all the time. Right. That is the track. Whenever we decide to do a series on getting you to learn racing games, that's going to be your benchmark. You have to be good at that track.
I feel like we're going to have to stream this because I'm going to rage quit.
We're going to record this, and you're not going to be able to rage quit because we're going to put you in a sim rig.
Oh,
we're going to get you steering wheel and pedals, and we're going to get you to learn.
I mean, I'd probably do better with the steering wheel than a controller, but still.
Yeah, but think about it. You're going to feel every bump in the wheel. You're not going to feel the G-forces of you going forward and backward.
I found out 2 years ago that they actually have a clutch in that car. I thought it was all automatic paddle shiftings.
Well, you got to think about it. You have to launch, dump the clutch. You get a best launch that way. Plus, it's not a pedal.
What is it?
It's a paddle.
But I thought they have an actual physical clutch in the car.
The only thing they do, but it's the paddles. They have like these paddles shift the gears. These paddles are their clutch. And then there's like 2 other paddles that might be like brake balance or something.
Okay, so whatever they're clutching here and then downshifting and upshifting.
If you look at, I forget whose it is, but it looks like it's like 2 big rubber pieces. That's the clutch.
Yeah.
They used to have where you had to pull 2 paddles back, and one would be where like it'd be full clutch. You let go of the other one, and the other one was like the bite point for it to start to go. You had to release the full clutch, and then the half clutch you had to kind of roll out of to get the car to go. I think that was back in 20. It was around the time of David Coulthard, because I remember he would talk about like, I have to, it's a procedure to get a car going.
Right.
And that was part of the procedure. So
that's why I would keep Joey here so that he can explain the car to me. because mechanically speaking, like, don't get me wrong, I love the cars. I think they're amazing, and the way too many fucking buttons and knobs for me.
Just wait till we talk
I
about
think it's amazing to see.
Just wait till we talk about F ducts and double diffusers.
Yeah, you might do that one alone. I'm not that smart.
Did you happen to watch the Braun GP documentary on
Yeah, I saw it.
Hulu, I think
it was on Hulu, yeah.
Yeah, that's where you'd learn about double diffusers and F ducts.
Oh yeah.
With the F duct was the thing where it was like a little vent that went into the car, and they found out that they'd put the vent right here, so when they were on the straights, the drivers would just put their hand over it, and it would help with downforce, or it'd help with making the car a little more slippery through the air, so that way they could, go faster. It was almost like DRS before DRS kind of thing.
Right. And they'll probably go back to it when DRS gets removed next year.
No, they're going to do active aero.
Active aero.
So the front wings are going to be able to move, and then the rear wings are going to move, and there's going to be all kind of different shit. And I don't think there's going to be zones. I think it's use it whenever.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
All right, now that we had our little 101 on the car, you want to talk about the Grand Prix?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
I don't feel like the sprint was really worth talking about. I mean, aside from Piastri passing Verstappen in lap 15, that's the most exciting thing.
It was Lewis took off and he was gone.
Yeah,
and that was it.
That was it. There's a sprint.
That's what sprints pretty much are. It's just go. There's no real excitement. I haven't found that many of them to be exciting. Maybe the one where Lewis came from like the back and almost won in Brazil, but I don't find the sprints very exciting.
I think it's a good change up from just, straight on 3 practices, because you get more engagement. More people are watching the sprints.
I do like them. I like more racing.
Yeah.
The one thing I wish that they would do is I wish that they would kind of make it involve the race a little more. Like, there was a rumor that they were gonna,
like, the sprint would set up the grid.
That, or there was a rumor that like they were gonna reverse the grid.
Yeah,
they honestly need to do like F2 does, where I don't know if they still do it. I haven't seen F2 races this year because the one opportunity I had, they canceled the race.
Yeah.
You do qualifying for the sprint race. You take the top 10, you flip them, and then
just the top 10.
Yeah, you just flip the top 10. 1. Yeah. So if you get the pole for the Grand Prix, you start 10th in the sprint race. Oh,
I see what you're saying.
Something where, maybe you'll get, and it's kind of a manufactured thing where you'll get, teams that don't normally get points will get points, but at the same time, then it's like, hey, maybe it'll help with that midfield battle where, say, Williams is like, man, we always qualify 10th. Okay, go win a sprint race. You could get a little extra points, and maybe those teams that battle like that'll qualify will want to be in Q3 a little more and maybe go for 10th a little more to get 8 points.
Well, if you also think about it too, whoever ends up in 8, 9, 10 is always going to be a toss up where between the middle of the pack. So you could be like having Alpine on the front line, and then you have a dogfight to see if they can maintain that position. And then it really becomes a constructors thing. So I see what you're saying. I think it might be a good change up. Will they do it next year? Probably not. But
no, because when they talked about like reversing the grid, like doing the entire grid, drivers were like, absolutely not. Can't do that.
Not the entire grid. That doesn't make sense.
But it was the teams that are typically in the front, Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari. They were the ones that were the loudest saying, no, this is a really bad idea. So,
I mean, don't get me wrong. If Max can go from 17 and win the race, it's possible.
I mean, they can all do
chaos too.
All the top teams can do it. They just have to have the right strategy. The problem with sprint races is they're so short, you don't need strategy.
Yeah, no, it's just run to the end of the race.
So you had Fernando Alonso had the brake trouble early.
Yep. He retired after one lap.
That sucks for him. it kind of makes you wonder, like, how much longer is he going to continue to race in the sport?
Yeah.
He's the oldest driver by, I want to say, like 3 years, 4 years. The man just loves to race. Like, I don't blame him for wanting to stay in it. I'm glad he still does it. Like,
He's still competitive.
he's the last link to the V10s, aside from, or I say that.
Wasn't there
I think
something about
Lewis,
him wanting to stick around until the V10s came back?
I didn't see that. Um, and it's not a guarantee that the V10s will stay or will come back. Um, Audi has come out publicly and said that they oppose the V10 coming back when they join next year, taking over for Kick Sauber.
Well, they oppose it because they're designing a V6.
Well, they're designing a V6. They're putting a lot of money into it, and plus, if you look at their successful cars, it's the it's the hybrids. You know, they won Le Mans multiple years with a turbo diesel. They figured it out with the hybrids. They stopped racing in that. You know, they did Dakar with a hybrid. It's they want to go in that direction. You know, that's the thing with like a lot of OEMs when they join racing series, it's because the way that that engine is made is something that they're kind of already making, but they could take that technology and put it in their road cars. So, perfect example, as weird as this is going to, you know, transition to NASCAR, they're talking about Honda joining the Cup Series. What car they would use is beyond me. I don't know. They don't make a V8.
Right. Like almost
You know,
every Honda car on the road has the same engine, if I'm not mistaken.
give or take, yeah, like for the most part. Toyota had a V8 in the Tundra. So they had a motor to use. Well, now they don't make V8s. They do turbocharged V6s. And I think all their range is hybrid. So they're going to want hybrid at some point, I'd assume, in their racing. But that's why they race in World Endurance Championship. That's why they race in WRC. Those series have hybrid engines. Chevrolet still puts a V8 in the Silverado. Ford puts a V8 in the Mustang. So they're going to continue to race NASCAR because they race V8s. But that's not going to stop them from saying, oh, I want to race in IMSA. I want to race in WEC. I want to race in Formula One. GM is joining Formula One next year with Cadillac. So you have to have something involved in the series to want to be a part of it. And Audi does not make a V8 anymore. I think they got rid of. I don't think they make the R8, which was their V8 powerhouse. Their e-tron program is doing great, but they don't have the only full electric racing they have is Extreme E, and which I think is going hydrogen, and Formula E. So
interesting.
I can understand why they don't want to go to the V10s. I'm disappointed in that as a race fan, but because now they're using fully sustainable fuels that they keep talking about. And Formula One has this net zero by 2030 goal that how's that going to affect it? A lot of these manufacturers want to go to that net zero by 2030 with sustainable fuels and all that for their road cars eventually. So
we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But now that Joey's had his tangent,
I get on tangents. I'm very passionate about V10s and loud noises. It's like I was talking about with my coworkers today. Dodge got bullied into putting a V8 back in the Charger because it was originally because it was originally going to be just become an electric car. Well, then everyone complained. They're like, "Well, no, it's got to have an engine in it. It's a Charger," and they put a V6 in it, and that didn't make people happy. So now apparently they're going to put a V8 in it.
Kind of like the electric Mustang with the little button to switch to the audio for the fucking revving.
Yeah,
that's so stupid.
But I'll be honest. Just on my continuing on my tangent, I'm okay with the electric Mustang. It's different. I wish they wouldn't have given it the the name Mustang, I wish they would have just said, "Hey, it's a Mach E."
Yeah,
That's it. Just call it the Ford Mach E. Done.
I get it.
But back to the race.
All right, race strategy. Everyone thought a two-stopper was going to be the way to go. Turned out to be the one-stopper.
That's what happened last year. I think
At
the winning
China?
strategy. Yeah, I think the winning strategy last year was a one-stop race, and it was everyone's
Well,
like, "Oh, two-stop, two-stop," but it's like they stretched it out to a one-stop.
well, the hard compound was the C2, wasn't it? Which is the new compound. I think it
Think
was
so.
C2, C3, C4.
I think so.
Joey's gonna Google it, make sure.
Yes.
Um, I do know the C2 is the new compound because they have said it like 1,800 fucking times. But so maybe this new compound is just lasting really well. I mean, you would think there would be more tire deg on a new track because it's not as slick, like you said earlier. But that hard tire lasted a long time. I think Lance was on, he started on hards and he lasted what, 30 something laps, pretty close to it. So everyone who started on mediums in the beginning pushed as far as they could before they started losing traction and then switched to that hard. And tire deg was like not happening at all in those cars. I guess there was enough rubber had gotten placed by that point where they were just comfortable and that left front didn't wear down that much.
I mean, it also it just depends on the strat, like the day, like the way the day goes. When you go into a race, like the playing strategy, typically you look at the race as you go, and you're like, okay, the tires aren't degrading like we thought they would, like they did in practice. So then, hey, maybe we could last a little longer on this tire. In my honest opinion, I mean, the way these tires are built, a lot of times it's, hey, one-stop strategies are fine. I think the only way you're going to make this a little more interesting, but you're not going to be able to do it because it's not going to happen, is you put refueling back in. You allow these teams to run full speed as hard as they
Super
can.
light.
You let them run super light, but you let them run out of fuel, and then they can refuel again. You just put into place a process where you do like World Endurance. When you're fueling the car, you cannot touch the car. You fuel it. When you're done, then you can change tires. If you do something like that, then I think we make this racing a little more exciting, because then it comes down
Super
to the
long
engine
pit
tuners.
stops.
Yeah, but when you think about it, every team's got to do it.
But
So
would
it all
everyone
comes out
do
of,
it, or would like the back of the pack just run heavy for the beginning of the race?
well, no, because what'll happen is your fuel tank will be so small that it'll only last 20 laps.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you decrease the size of the fuel tank too.
Yeah, like they have the size of these fuel cells so that they can make it the entire race without fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And they run it light, like I think they mentioned it, like they run light, so they got to get to their number, so they kind of slowed off a little bit in the middle of the race. So I think a little bit of that also kind of helped with tire deg not being as high.
Yeah, that would
If
make
you're
sense.
backing off in the corner, you're backing off in entry to kind of keep your speed for the middle of the corner a little bit higher, but you're not jamming the car in, then all you're doing is helping yourself. But if you're sitting there and you're jamming the car in there, you're going full throttle, full brake, tire deck goes up, you're screwing your own race.
Yeah. So most of the race really, I don't know, feel just kind of standard, just kind of running things. No one was really fighting for positions too much. I mean, you had your usual squabbles, but I don't feel like it got exciting until like the last 6 laps when Lando was losing that brake pedal.
I mean, it was always going to be McLaren this week. Even with the sprint race, they had the speed, they had the control. I think Oscar had something to prove after last week.
It was Oscar's race to lose.
Yeah, and I mean, when he got pole, it's like your strategy sits there and goes, all right, this is our guy. You're going to get the preferred strategy for this weekend. So it doesn't surprise me one bit. That's pretty much how it's going to be all year. until the upgrades come.
Well,
In my
that's what I
opinion,
like about how McLaren runs their ship too, because like while Lando is the senior driver, they still have they're still allowed to race for the most part, especially when it is okay with the strategy. But also there is no like, oh, Lando's behind you, but he's the points leader. We're gonna have you flip. At least not yet. Maybe down the road towards the end of the season. But right now it's like let's maximize our points as best as we can. And I think that was the big point of when Lando was starting to kind of stress. And I don't blame him for stressing. Like you're going 100 and something miles an hour and you have no fucking brakes, or you're slamming your brake pedal to the floor and you're still not slowing down. And it goes against his driving style too, because he is a very late braker. So I can appreciate his stress in those situations, but I appreciate his engineer even more for, constantly talking to him and keeping his cool and being like, okay, remember, just let off early, then hit the brakes. Let's no hard braking kind of situation. Like still guiding him along that way.
well, the problem is the brake pedal is meant to be super stiff. Like you're not supposed to. You might move it that much in the corner,
Right. It's like a
and
brand new car. You barely tap the brakes and you're like jerking forward.
exactly. And I mean that's you probably see their brake traces and they're hard in and they just kind of ease off, but they're not going to the floor when they're hitting the brakes.
Yeah,
So
it's more like a go-kart pedal.
it's I'm curious to see what that struggle was, why they had that brake failure toward the end of the race. Was he just using too much brake? Was it, you know, a brake booster problem? What was it? I think that it's hopefully just a gremlin for this week and it just reared its head because of the sprint race.
Right.
Because once you get into Parc Ferme, you can't fuck with the car. Which they go into Parc Ferme after sprint qualifying and they come out of it after the sprint. So if you don't see it, then you don't know that that's going to be a problem. So if they would have known it was going to be a problem, they probably would have messed with it before qualifying.
Right, because that's what happened to Hulkenberg. Didn't they take it out of Park Ferme after sprint quali? Because he was a pit lane
They
start
did
for quali
they
or for
messed with
sprint.
his suspension.
Yeah,
And I thought that was Liam. That
that
might
was
have
for the
been
race.
okay. Yeah, there was suspension
Hulkenberg for
issues
for the sprint itself. He did.
okay. But let's actually, congrats to Piastri for winning the race and making up for last week's trouble. But I think we need to just we need to move on to the big news of the weekend coming out of that race.
I'm all for it. Let's talk some drama.
So Liam has not performed in that second Red Bull like Red Bull wants him to. So there was an emergency meeting in I think they were in Dubai with a lot of higher ups at Red Bull. And news coming out of that is that Yuki Tsunoda is going to take Liam Lawson's seat at Red Bull, and Liam Lawson's going back to the Racing Bulls.
For Japan.
Starting in Japan, which, in my opinion, is a really bad idea because he's already got the pressure of, hey, it's my home race. Now it's going to be the pressure of his home race, and it's his first race with Red Bull in a car that is underperforming.
But what about the nasty rumor of Honda pushing for this? Because when they were looking at the seat last year, there was talks of Honda giving an extra $10 million to Red Bull if Yuki was put in that seat. And Red Bull said no.
That's what racing is. That's what Formula One racing is. If you look at Lance Stroll, if you look at, let's go back. Nicholas Latifi, Nikita Mazepin. There's a couple others. They brought money with them to the team, and that's how they got their seat. I mean, that's why Lance Stroll got his start at Williams, because his dad had the money with sponsorship and said, here, I'll
And then
give
he
you this
bought
much
his own
money,
team.
put his kid in. He bought his own manufacturer. They became a team. So it's Liam is one of those drivers where it's the talent brought him there, and he's still a talented driver.
Yeah.
Anyone who says that he's not a talented driver doesn't know Formula One. Let's go back the last couple years with, all these teams, with that seat. Max Verstappen got in that car in, I want to say it was 2015, and look at the teammates he's had. He had Daniel Ricciardo for 68 races. Then it went to Pierre Gasly. Pierre Gasly got replaced halfway through the year. Alex Albon takes over. He was there for a year and a half. Gets replaced by Sergio Perez, who at the time, coming off of his first win it was that COVID year. So it was that weird, like, oh, we're running 2 races at the same track, but it's a different layout. I think it was Styrian. No, it wasn't the Styrian Grand Prix. It was Bahrain circuit, but it was just that outer circle.
Yeah.
I can't remember what they called it. But I remember that track was super fast. I think it was the first track they ever ran a sub-minute.
Jesus. Well, yeah, because it's a big loop, wasn't it?
Yeah. But it was the one that George Russell took over for Lewis because Lewis had COVID. He had already locked up the championship at that point. So it was like, oh, man, George is going to win his first race because he's in a fast car. And he was fast. But they put Valtteri's tires on his car, and then he had a tire with a puncture. So he got screwed out of that. Sergio Perez was a teammate for, like it says, 90 races. But then last year he started to struggle. So then they're like, okay, Liam's going to replace him. The problem is this car is not where it should be. They're struggling with this car. Max Verstappen has voiced his opinion on this car multiple times, and it's come out in Dutch media that Red Bull's not listening. I think that's because of Jos, his dad. But it's something that you can't take lightly with the problems they're having, especially if you want to win a Constructors' Championship. The car is not what it should be, but this is where you're learning what you have without Adrian Newey.
Mm-hmm.
And, how important was he to that team? God only knows. But, with this new regulations, what's going to happen, in the next couple of years if Max's concerns are not heard? Is he going to just say, hey, I want to breach my contract and go somewhere else? Is he just going to leave the sport, go race somewhere else, go sim racing for the rest of his life and raise his kid with his girlfriend? Who knows? Like, he's
got enough money stashed away by now, I'm sure.
But I mean, if I'm Max and they're not hearing me, I'm concerned. Like, how hard are you willing to dig your heels into the ground for this car? Like, let's fix it. If I'm telling you there's a problem, we need to fix it, and we need to find a way to fix it fast, or we're not going to even think about competing for a Constructors' Championship this year, and we're going to lose a lot of money because that's a lot of money that's thrown out in that Constructors' race.
Well, that's why I'm thinking they're scrambling, and they went back with Honda and said, hey, if you give us that money, we'll put him in that spot. And Honda wants him in there for Suzuka.
But what's going to happen if you put him in and he struggles like Liam did?
Then you're back at square one and not Liam. I think Yuki will struggle. I think he's a good race car driver, but he's too hot-headed to keep his cool in a car that is pretty much a land rocket ship, or at least the RB19 was, and the 20 wasn't as bad as this one, but it's at a point where Yuki taking over, and I agree with some people, Liam may pass him up in a racing bull, and it'll just prove how it's the car and not so much the driver. Because I do agree. I don't think if you got Max saying he's struggling and something needs to change, and it's the car that's built around him, there's your argument right there that it's gonna be the car more than anything. We'll just see in Suzuka if Yuki takes the spot, which I think he will. to see if it is the car. Now, if Yuki does amazing and even passes up Max, we'll see that chaos unfold as well.
And I think the other problem is it comes down to the fact that they have a young drivers program and they want to use it, which I don't blame them. They should be able to use their young drivers program.
I mean, that's the point of having a second team, right?
But
for feeders.
But the problem is, if you have a young drivers program, every couple of years you're going to run into okay, there's a stop. We've run out of seats because Formula One is so limited. I think at one point there used to be a rule where you could run 3 cars, and they got rid of it. It was like the last couple races of the year, you could run a third car, and it basically was like the test car.
That sounds like chaos.
What young driver do we want to put in? It would help with the championship, that kind of stuff. I want to say that happened. I'm going to look that up. But while I look that up, the thing that, they want to use it. So that's why if someone's sitting there saying, well, why didn't they sign Carlos when he was a free agent? Or why didn't they just sign Daniel? The thing with Carlos was they had an idea that, they wanted him at a certain point in his career to be, hey, this is what you're going to do. And they just couldn't agree on it. Mm-hmm. Carlos thinks that he can still compete, which he can. He still wants to compete for championships, but they want guys that'll kind of help what's going on right now and then take over in a few years' time. Carlos isn't at that age, though. I think he just turned 30.
30-something. Yeah, he's young.
This year. He might be 34. But it's just weird to me that, you don't bring Daniel back. You give him that shot. Like, hey, look, this is pretty much your last go. We're not going to – it wasn't fair to you to be at Racing Bulls and then we cut you early. But I think at that point they were looking for the replacement for Sergio, and they wanted to go young in that program. So that's why they did it.
I personally feel Daniel lost his edge. Something happened maybe after he broke his wrist where he just kind of reevaluated things and really wasn't enjoying racing as much anymore. Or maybe he just came back too soon and had too much pain in his hand. I know that was one theory that I was thinking about because he came back as a medical professional. He came back very quickly. And when you're doing like turns and your hands have been surgically repaired and you're coming back like weeks later, that's insane. Like you don't go back to work for months if you have to do like heavy lifting and kind of stuff. And that those G forces just in turning the car and all that is difficult enough in its own. So speaking of Danny Rick, though, I saw something on Instagram. I think it's just a troll job, but I find it funny. That said that Daniel Ricciardo called Christian Horner after it was announced that Yuki was going to take over, laughing and then hung up on him.
Yeah, it's definitely a troll job.
It is, but
you
it's
got
so
interneted.
Funny. No, I knew it was fake.
Honestly,
but it's just funny to see.
Honestly, I'm surprised that they didn't just go with Yuki at the time. But I think honestly that Honda deal is, they're out the door after this year. They're going to Ford. It's already signed. The ink's dry on the contract. I think that's honestly why they didn't put Yuki in the car. It doesn't hurt to give him a shot. See what he can do. I think if I'm Red Bull, you find a way to get Liam's confidence back. That's the biggest thing. Is he's lost confidence in this car. He's lost a little bit of confidence in his driving.
But don't you feel that his confidence will come back with having that pressure off? Because remember, when he took Daniel's spot, he was doing really good.
I think it'll be
as good as you can for limited exposure.
I think it'll be that the pressure will be off because he's not in a Red Bull. Being Max's teammate just in itself brings pressure because you have to, as it's shown, you have to compete for podiums. You have to compete for points because when that team starts hemorrhaging points like they have been, it's ugly. at the end of the last season, Sergio wasn't scoring the points that he was the year before and the year before that. He wasn't competing for the wins. He wasn't really competing for top. He was competing for top tens, but top tens only get you 1 to 2 to 4 points. They don't get you 25, 18 points like top two do. So if you give him the shot, you take that pressure off of him, but you talk to him and you say, listen, the car's a struggle. We get it. We're going to put you back at Racing Bulls to build your confidence back up. Yes, we're putting Yuki in the car. But again, race car drivers do not like sharing cars. The biggest thing that you could do to hurt a driver is tell them they can't drive their car. Someone else is driving their car. Right. There's a famous video of Dale Earnhardt had a really bad accident, tried to race at Indianapolis the next week, had to pit. They put Mike Skinner in the car because he was just too hurt. And he's getting interviewed, and you could just hear the emotion in his voice that, like, I'm not driving the car. Like, this is not right. I need to be in that car, because if someone else is driving your car and they provide a result that you couldn't, you have that thing over your head of, hey, here he is. I have that, like, he's right behind you. He's breathing down your neck to take your seat. I mean, look at the whole thing with Jack Doohan and Frank Colapinto. Franco Colapinto is, he's a reserve driver with Alpine. They hadn't even run practice. Oh, well, They hired Franco Colapinto. Are you nervous about your seat?
That's dirty. That's just bad media.
If I'm Red Bull, what I honestly do, let's say Yuki doesn't do well with the car and Liam doesn't do well with the car and they don't fix it. I think next year you call up Danny Rick. Hey, you want back in Formula One? Help us redevelop this car. Help us bring this car back to the glory days.
But they have to actually do the work. If they're not going to do anything to the car.
But what I'm saying like
the fucking car.
That's
Change the fucking car. I'm sorry. I said the fucking line wrong. I should.
All right, Christian Horner.
But at the same time, if the car's not working, fix the fucking car. But I guess we won't know until Suzuka.
I honestly think that Red Bull might be looking at the car saying, like, the car's fucked this year. You just got to deal with it, because what's the use of fixing this year's car, spending all that money, getting to the cost cap, and then going into next year? Because I'm pretty sure that developing next year's car counts against the cost cap.
Probably.
So if that's the case, hey, just survive.
But I thought they were only allowed to work on the engine right now. Like, I feel like this year you could, like, start your designing, but you can't do any of the testing, obviously.
You could do the wind tunnel.
Yeah.
They have, like, you build the model car, you put it in the wind tunnel, you get the data from that. But you're limited on how much of that you can do.
Right.
So you utilize it, you have to split it. Like, let's say, I want to say it might be like 40 hours of wind tunnel time or 100 hours of wind tunnel time if you're a bottom team. If you're a top team, it might be 30. So you're going to utilize every second of that time you can to, all right, we have to have next year's car ready so that way we're fighting for wins day one. But we're having trouble with this car, so we're going to go maybe until, like, race 8. If we don't have the car figured out by the 8th race, we have no business competing for a Constructors' Championship this year. We're going to start developing next year's car.
Well, I think that's part of the reason why Red Bull is scrambling so much. So they want to get the right driver in the spot, but this will also prove whether or not the car is fucked and whether or not they're probably only going to do one upgrade this year would be my guess for Red Bull.
Because if you look at,
and maybe the rest of the top,
they're going to do multiple upgrades. You don't just sit there and punt it and do none. You still put your effort into this year's car, but you might not test it as much. You might just say, hey, this might work. This should work. You know, you do all the digging and stuff outside of the wind tunnel, and you do computer models and say, well, this is what we get. Because their computers are really smart. They can sit there and see how the wind would go off of a computer. Like, this is what it's going to do. Then you put the rakes on the car when you go to practice and you say, okay, this is it. But you have the old spec with you in case the new spec is completely off.
Well, sure.
You'll get a penalty, but at that point, you're just trying to
practice. You're not going to get a penalty because you're not in permit.
But you have to. I don't know at what point it becomes you have to change. You can change like for non-like. It might be when you're in park firmé, you have to change like for like. Like, it can't be any different. It has to be the same. But
without getting a penalty.
Right. But I think that in the case of Red Bull, you get someone that can at least compete for a couple points, get top 10s. And
I mean, that's all Yuki has is like 3 points anyway.
Who knows how many? Yeah, but his points don't carry over.
They stay with Racing Bull.
Yes. I'm pretty sure.
Well, no. Driver's points stick, but those 3 points go to the constructor.
No, I think those 3 points that he got with Racing Bulls stays with Racing Bulls because he got them in a Racing Bull.
But it's still the same season, same driver. That's interesting.
The driver's points go with him.
That's what I'm saying.
But the constructor, that car that he drove got the 3 points. So that car's points go to the constructors. The driver points that he got follow him to Red Bull.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So he'll still have the 3 points, but Racing Bull will have the 3 points.
Yeah, Red Bull doesn't get those 3 points.
No. And that wouldn't make sense either. No, but I was understanding as Yuki loses his points. And I was like, that doesn't make sense because the drivers and the constructors are different for these exact kind of scenarios.
And the fact that, if something happened to a driver, like, Carlos had an appendectomy, Ollie Behrman jumped in and he got points on his debut. Ferrari got those points. So also, I looked up when they had 3 teams in one race. Renault was the last team to have entered 3 cars for a race in the 1985 German Grand Prix, but only 2 of their cars were eligible for championship points. They've brought up, like, should we do 3-car teams just because of how small the grid is and how much of a traffic jam it's been lately.
Can I tell you how much it hurts my soul that Esteban Ocon is in 7th place in the points right now?
I like it because I want Haas to succeed.
Haas is fine. Haas can succeed. I think Gene has, loosened up the wallet a little bit, but just Esteban, like, he just looks like an asshole. He drives like an asshole too.
Is it because he's French?
No, because I like Pierre Gasly. I just think Pierre's in a shit car because it's French. It only knows how to go fast when it's in reverse.
I mean, you're not wrong.
I know. I have my moments, but I'm loving seeing Albon in 6. Kimmy's in 5th. I keep forgetting Oscar, even with his win this past weekend, is only in 4th with 34 points. And the difference between 2nd and 4th is literally 2 points. Max has 36, Russell has 35, and Oscar has 34. And then I think, Lando's got 44? Yeah. Lando's first with 44. So it's not like that 2nd place is a close fight, and I'm loving it. I think it's great for the sport.
It's gonna get better as the season goes on.
Yeah. And what is it? The top 14 all have a point. So it sucks seeing Gasly down there with no points, but it's Alpine. That's the problem. It's still a Renault.
They're gonna struggle for a little bit with the regulations that have come, the directive that came about, but they'll figure it out. They always somehow get a point, but it's a rookie driver and it's Pierre Gasly. Just, they're trying.
It's
That's
hard
the
to
best they can do right
see
now.
also Fernando not even ranked because he hasn't finished a race yet.
Yeah, but again, we're only 2 races into a 24 race season.
Yeah.
Things will improve.
They need to. I think Aston Martin has a good fighting chance, even with Lance Stroll being technically their number one driver right
I
now.
think let those upgrades come from Adrian Newey, and it'll be they'll be solid.
It is weird seeing Lance Stroll ahead of Lewis and Charles. And you got this shit eating grin because you fucking love it. This is the kind of drama you like. He looks like a window licker in his picture.
It it will get better for Ferrari. Fred Vasseur is this Ferrari team is different than the Ferrari teams of old. This Ferrari car has responded better under Fred Vasseur than it has under anybody else.
I would agree too. I think Lewis coming in is going to be help revitalize Ferrari. The thing is you need a strategist who isn't stupid.
They're gonna Ferrari strategy them every once in a while, but
don't fuck with this strategy. Just stick with it. Or if you're gonna change it, let the driver decide. Like
they asked Charles, like, hey, do you like plan A or plan B?
Right.
And he's like, I think we should do plan C. And it's like, okay. If you take the disqualification out, they're competing.
100% agree. But they need to do something about not being underweight, not dragging the car too much, where they're, that half a millimeter to get DQ'd.
They'll figure it out in Japan.
Japan, I think they'll have it. They're going to ride higher. I can already tell you.
It's going to suck because the race is at what time?
I think my time is like 9 p.m. in Mountain Time.
No, it's not.
It's a 2:00 race locally. Let me see.
My time, the race is at midnight.
So I have an 11:00 one, which is not as bad.
Qualifying is at 1 a.m.
Yeah.
But it's a normal race weekend. So 3 practice sessions, a qualifying session, and the race. So
I'm still seeing that it's sources, nothing official that Sonoda's taken over.
They're not going to announce it until like later in the week.
Right before it, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I'm excited for the remainder of this season.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to add before we close out this episode?
China was a good race. I think Japan's going to be even better. Hopefully it doesn't storm like it always fucking does over there.
Let us see if they have.
That's my biggest concern. I want to see it. Well,
report.
I think since I've been watching, which has been a little over 5 years now, I think I've seen one dry race in Suzuka.
All right, so if I use the Weather Channel, which says 10 days, but they put out 2 weeks worth of weather. On race day, 35% chance of showers. And then the rest of the weekend will be partly cloudy. So it should be a dry race.
I'm okay with, partial rain, add a little chaos. That's fine. I just don't like one race in Japan without a red flag, please. Just one. That's all I ask. Give me 2025.
But I like red flags because it brings out a little bit of chaos.
I don't in Japan because that's where people die.
Stop. That hasn't happened since 2014. Settle down.
It still happens.
It was 2014 and they raced in a typhoon.
Well, they should have not.
They have rules. No one disagrees with you on that, but that hasn't happened since 2014.
Yeah. Now I'm excited. I think Bahrain and Saudi Arabia is going to be awesome races too. Miami's just going to be a fucking shit show of sideshows.
It'll be fun.
Koto will be good.
Koto's not till October.
I know. Las Vegas might actually have people there.
I think now that they have data on the race, and I think tickets are cheaper for Vegas. I think they announced the ticket prices went down.
It's still way too high. I can tell you that right now.
It's Vegas. Everything's high in Vegas,
especially the people, because pot's legal there.
Yeah, that's true.
But no, I'm excited. I'm ready for the European tour because I find those to be some of the most thrilling races, to be honest.
I'm just ready for the next race. I hate that there's no race this week. I love that there's no race this week because I got a busy weekend. But
yeah, is it weird that I don't like the Pacific Tour? Like, I like Australia. I want to go see a race in Australia, but like,
oh, you don't like Singapore, you don't like Japan, you don't like China, like those races?
Yeah,
it's because of the time.
The timing doesn't help
because you have to. You basically
Singapore. I do like the layout, but like when they're all there, like it's too hot. So I think it got moved this year, right? Did it get moved to later where it's in a cooler time? I can't remember, but
you got me looking stuff up.
I mean, they're already killing themselves by being in that hot ass car, and then you got them. I think what last year
it's in October, but you also got to remember. I'm pretty sure Singapore is pretty close to the equator, so that don't matter. It's always hot,
and it's humid as fuck.
Exactly. It's New Orleans. It's New Orleans.
Yeah.
It's New Orleans. The humidity is 100.
Oh, the humidity, yes. Yeah. I was thinking more like closer to like maybe, like Jamaica or something with heat.
But at least with like Jamaica, you have like a sea breeze. In New Orleans, you just have hot. Yeah. And then if you buy buildings, you're in a freaking convection oven with barely any wind.
Yeah, the breeze isn't enough to make it worthwhile down there. So, what about you? What are you excited for?
Just next week. Just put the race cars back on the track. I want to see the news that I just want to see it done, that it happened, that Liam Larson's replaced by Yuki. You get Yuki in the car, you get him acclimated, and it's going to be weird seeing Grill the Grid with Liam wearing Red Bull gear and Yuki wearing Racing Bulls gear, but
I can guarantee you they're scrambling to get that shit changed right now.
I don't think they. I don't.
They'll probably put it on Max's private plane so that it's there for fucking Suzuka.
Maybe, but we shall see.
Yep.
So, on that note, it's time to end. Thank you very much for listening. Like and subscribe. Send us a review, rate it, all that stuff.
Hit a thumbs up or some shit. I'm sure we'll have a poll on the Spotify one.
We'll figure it out. But in that case, that's Rob. I'm Joey. That has been the Ready Steady Go podcast. Until next time, peace out.